Welcome back, everyone. We're having a working lunch today, as usual, and we're so pleased to be joined by the president of MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties, Michael Sanderson, for his annual briefing. Michael, we're so glad you made the time for us. Take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I'll start by offering regrets on behalf of the elected president of the Maryland Association of Counties. Commissioner Wilbur Levengood from Caroline County has been my partner in reaching out and joining elected officials across the state, as we do throughout the year. He had hoped to clear time to join for this virtual meeting today. He's in the midst of some complicated family circumstances with the arrival of a first grandchild and is in transit in Montana, sends his regrets. So I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to connect with a number of you at our upcoming winter conference, but he sends his best. So with that, usually this is a good time of year to have a fairly informal and sort of sprawling conversation about state policy and so forth. What I'll hope to do is, for the most part, abandon the materials that we sent you all in advance. I like to get you a packet of materials that are things we've been covering through the media from the Maryland Association of Counties and issues that we've been engaged in. And wanted to give you that as background, but I think what probably is the best use of everyone's time would be, let me hit a few high notes. And if I don't get into sufficient detail on something, or if I miss something that you all would like to talk further about, an exchange is probably a better conversation than just me talking for a really lengthy amount of time. So let me carve out a bit of a window and we'll take it from there. The legislative session ahead in Annapolis, as far as statewide policy and so forth, that many of those things will affect counties, your budget, your priorities. We'll have two fun contours for this coming year. Every 4 years, as you all know, we're treated to a re-election cycle, which carries with it a certain effect on the political dialogue and so forth. So we're used to that 4-year cycle. A couple of years after each 10-year census count, we have the redrawing of districts, both for representation in Congress, but also for the Senate and the House, the Maryland General Assembly. And 2022 will be the double witching hour where we get to do basically both at once. So the degree of difficulty for the legislature ahead is a couple clicks higher than ordinary. The lay of the land for redistricting seems relatively clear in the months ahead. So for the benefit of your viewers, but also for you and your staff, it seems pretty clear that the General Assembly intends to convene a short special session to deal with congressional redistricting in early December. The word around town, it'll be the second week of December. That'll put it right around or possibly overlapping MACO's winter conference. Life sometimes sends you a lemon here or there, so we may lose some of the otherwise eager participants in our conference. But the General Assembly will convene to talk about districts for the U.S. House of Representatives, and that process is underway. If you've been following the headlines and the various work sessions, there are two separate commissions engaging public input and drawing draft maps of what maps might look like for districts for the next decade, one of which was created essentially by the governor, one of which was created essentially by legislative leaders. In Maryland, this is principally a legislative process. So if you're trying to keep your eye on the ball, the work product from the legislative redistricting commission is most likely to be the leading candidate for action in the General Assembly. That's probably going to get tied up in early December. The Constitution in Maryland requires the governor to make a proposed map for Senate and House districts for the state legislature at the opening of the legislative session. And so it might not technically be unconstitutional, but it would be untoward for the General Assembly to have already acted on that by the time the governor meets his constitutional obligation. So that'll be an early part of the January legislative session agenda. Expect that to be something like a week or 10 days and done in the month of January. If you're counting backwards from the filing deadline, as many current and would-be candidates may well be, the filing deadline is February 22nd. If the General Assembly finalizes a set of maps for House of Delegate seats by January 20th or 25th or thereabouts, you're talking about roughly a 1 month period, which is cutting it close, but gives everybody at least an opportunity to see the maps and know how that might set up. So that'll add a little extra political repercussions in the legislative session ahead. Pretty often when I have the opportunity to join you all, we talk about fiscal issues as the big umbrella, particularly if the setting in Annapolis is such where the state budget is in some degree of stress or crisis, and we're wary of budget cuts or cost shifts that might harm your local services and your local priorities. It doesn't appear to be that circumstance. The state just closed out the books for the last fiscal year with a cash surplus of well over $2 billion. We've already seen some salvos being sent into the media sphere about how the state might spend some of its momentary largesse, and whether that would look like rebates to taxpayers or launching new programs or doing some capital projects or other sorts of things. I think that's more likely to be the flavor of the fiscal debate for the most part for the year ahead. I hope we're not in a fending off $100 million budget cut or eating more costs of teacher pensions or other things like that happen in lean and difficult times at the state. So I hope we get a year off from those sort of debates, and we can instead talk about our mutual priorities. As I mentioned that, obviously the state is still in the midst of, and hopefully on its way out of, this pandemic, both a health and economic crisis. And I think policy and spending related to that will continue to be front burner, an issue of the moment. Receiving, and I think deserving, quite a lot of attention is our collective effort to keep people from being unfairly evicted if their economic circumstances for their rental property is a function of the pandemic we're part of. Montgomery County, along with your municipalities, along with other jurisdictions and the state, all have resources to be helpful, and that is proving to be imperfect but effective as a means to keep us from having a sort of a tsunami of pent-up eviction proceedings. We're not at zero, but we're also not underwater in the way that some other jurisdictions across the country have found themselves. So I'm hopeful that that'll remain on a positive course. We have gotten some good, productive concessions from the federal government leadership. The U.S. Department of Treasury did some restatements of its guidance deliberately based on feedback they got specifically from Maryland program heads, including some from Montgomery County. I think that's been helpful to clear some of what might have been red tape getting in the way of getting assistance out to people and families who need it. So I'm optimistic on that front. Is it possible that Maryland reinstates an actual moratorium or the equivalent on evictions? It's possible. I hope that will prove to be unnecessary and that the aid programs will address this problem satisfactorily. But I think we'll still see nibbling around the edges on local initiatives on how to target ARPA funds and the various federal funds. It would be a welcome turn of events if the federal government actually delivers on an infrastructure bill that, as we know, is kind of gummed up in the perpetually complicated process in the U.S. Congress. In the event that shakes free, we could be talking about dusting off a variety of very much needed infrastructure projects across our state, both at the state and local level, and make some great ground on that front, some pent-up demand on that front as well. I'll tick off just a couple other topics that have been hot and good conversation topics in other jurisdictions as conversation starters, if nothing else. The Maryland's commitment to rolling out and extending broadband access is at an all-time high as a function of providing educational opportunities, also economic development and promoting equity. You accomplish all of those by getting more people connected to high-speed access. The anecdotes of kids trying to get their homework done at a parking lot at a fast food restaurant have resonated in ways that nothing else has ever done before. The iron's hot. The feds have shown up with funds. It's an opportunity to get an even higher share of Marylanders connected. We've been successful in broadening the focus on that issue. It's not merely tiny, underserved, rural, communities that are missing out. There are pockets in every jurisdiction, including Montgomery, that are not sufficiently served by the private market at the moment. We can connect a lot of dots in the year or years ahead. Sort of accompanying that as another takeaway from the pandemic and the advent of remote work and meetings like these, I think has been a heightened focus on cybersecurity. We almost don't go 2 or 3 weeks without seeing another local government, even in the state of Maryland, get targeted by, we're holding your data hostage and we'll ransom it for Bitcoin. This has become a productive industry for certain players. Being prepared is important. Having a plan for recovery is important. And the challenge is even higher now that the share of people bringing their own device and their own remote access is far greater than it used to be. Being able to send the tech person down the hall and get everybody's patches upgraded used to be a matter of a hallway. Now it's a matter of all across the county. That's a different frontier. Having some state leadership and resources, hopefully without mandates and cookie cutters, I think is a productive way forward on an issue we all care about. I'll make a quick mention of education, as that's been a hot conversation topic as we've talked in years past in this setting. The biggest issue on my mind at the moment with education policy is how much comfort are we going to have with the student count that was just conducted on September 30th. Last fall, in the middle, the deep sense of the pandemic, we ended up with a lot of school systems reporting that their school count was down 6, 8, 10, 12%. And the state ultimately made, I think, a wise judgment in policy to more or less skip that enrollment count and figure it as noise rather than news. What's going to happen if this year's count is 3% off or 5% off? That some of those kids have come back, but not all of them. Do we have a data problem there as well? And if so, how do you remedy that? Does it require legislation or does it require just some patch over funding like the governor proposed last year? I don't know what lies ahead on that front, but technical modifications to something as consequential as the whole Kerwin funding plan over the next 10 years, even just a nip and tuck to a program of that magnitude ends up being consequential fiscal policy. So I've got a pin put in that, and maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll start to get a flavor of what stakeholders believe this year's count is good, or we may need to patch it over somehow. With that, there's a pretty wide range of things that I could get to. Transportation funding still in the balance, and I think will be a focus at a lot of levels, including the county and municipal governments. We're in the implementation stages of police reforms, and that has complicated contours for county governments. Independent of the policy of accountability for officers, the specifics of implementing a body camera program, but then having a county-wide accountability board that nominally seems to oversee municipal officers. There's some new frontiers there that may or may not get some legislative refinement in the year ahead. There's 20 minutes to be had on that if you want it. I'll leave it there for the moment. That's a quick smattering of policy issues that have been coming up in these conversations in other jurisdictions, and hopefully that kicks off whatever is on your collective minds, and I'd be happy to field any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you so much. You mentioned ARPA funds, and you're reminding me, have you seen counties using ARPA funds in creative ways that Montgomery County is not yet or might want to consider?
I think we're seeing the many shoes starting to drop there. And I will tell you, we did a full day symposium on ARPA plans and so forth, where we had I think we ended up with 17 counties physically present. We had a presentation by the nonprofit community, and I came away really impressed with their potential to be a force multiplier on a lot of local initiatives. So it may well be that some of the most exciting innovations that come with using ARPA funds may turn into not just launching a new county guided program inside the structure of the county government, but finding deliverers of the services who may be outside government and creating a two or multi-way partnership with nonprofit players. I think we're going to see a lot of that in the weeks and months ahead. I don't have chapter and verse to recite to you all today, but that's the sort of thing that we'll be doing a lot of coverage of, and in the writing we do on the Conduit Street blog that I think reaches you all on a Friday wrap up around noontime every Friday.
I love the Conduit Street blog and learn a lot from it. Sometimes I don't learn from our own government PIOs, including things that are happening in Montgomery County. Colleagues? Any questions so far? Okay.
Well, if that rounds things out on policy, I'll just make a really quick plug. We are putting together plans for an in-person conference in December in Cambridge.
I can't hear. Is it just me?
So December 8th through 10th in Cambridge down Dorchester County. We will anticipate being in person and having some more physical spacing, much like we did for the summer event. So the rooms will be larger and the seating will be a little more spaced out and that sort of thing. We may have a cap on overall capacity. For those of you who have attended that event in the past, it's in one large facility, which we tend to fill up. So we may be in some outdoor heated tents and some other things to give folks a little more elbow room, recognizing the circumstance. But hopefully the situation on the ground merits an opportunity for that, that camaraderie that comes with being in person. So we're looking forward to that as well. And content is rolling out in the weeks ahead.
Right. Now, many of us enjoyed your summer conference. Will you have a mask requirement this time indoors?
We will follow what the guidance is from our public health leaders. At the moment, what we're asking is everybody who registers has an acknowledgement that there are going to be restrictions of one sort or another. If things are really rough on the ground, we may very well impose a full requirement. I can't envision a circumstance where we don't alert people as they come to the facility that we ask people to wear a mask and ask people to engage in distancing. So that'll be a strong recommendation from us, and I think that's the floor.
Great. Okay, thank you. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome, Michael. It's good to see you. I plan on coming in December. I will be wearing a mask, and I hope everyone will as well. But appreciate your continued leadership and I enjoyed attending part of the summer conference this year, which you guys did, as always, a great job of. So I'm sure you're feeling this. We certainly are. There's tension sort of across the board in a variety of different areas. And I think this intersection between the work of boards of education, councils, municipalities, the state has never been more important, and the coordination of those efforts. The best part of MACO for me is always the coordination and the discussion with our colleagues from other jurisdictions. But quite frankly, it's also a chance for us to catch a breath among colleagues from other forms of government. And so I do think it would be beneficial to all of us for us to be more intentional about inviting and trying to actively encourage members of our Board of Education, create more time and space for members of the delegation to interact with us as well. And so if there's an opportunity to create time and space to really ensure that there's a cross-section of elected officials at various levels of government, I think that would be helpful. And moving forward, having sessions that are intentional in bringing us together to have some tough conversations and an important dialogue would also be very productive. And I always respect very much the panel presentations that are done during the conference. And I believe you guys make the opportunity to submit questions in advance available. I think it would be even more important for us to be able to do that to maximize our time together even more effectively. So an opportunity to submit advanced questions, particularly of panels, because there's sometimes awkward silence when people are busy and they're often multitasking. I know I certainly am, but that would be another way of getting productive conversations going and making the dialogue even more efficient than it already is.
Very much welcome the suggestions. I'm a big believer that I want to have at least one item in the hallway. I mean, our conference is good at having 4 or 5 breakout sessions at once with a variety of different topics. And it's really easy to fall into the rut of throw 3 speakers at the front of the room and have them talk for 45 minutes and wrap up with Q&A. And there's a lot of content that lends itself to that model. And we want to make those as effective as we can. I also want very much for there to be something that looks and feels different at every time window. I want to have a session that's very much audience driven, or sort of a back and forth debate, or things along those, hands-on. We've done work tabletop exercises and things like that. I like to have a few different flavors sprinkled in, but both of those comments are very well taken. I appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else? Michael, did you get through your whole presentation?
I think I've go ahead. If you have more questions, that's great. I've covered everything that I felt like I wanted to, but open anything else you got.
Councilmember Katz, were you trying to get in?
No, but I did want to welcome Michael as well. It's always good seeing him. Are you actually in Annapolis as we speak, so you have less travel time? Is that what we have?
I'll do you one better. I'm actually in my home office today. So I've been working very hard on the background for my one day being graded by the room rater if I ever attain that kind of level. But nonetheless, working from home. So I missed the opportunity to have a candid lunch in person and chit chat over snacks. That's always great. And we'll look forward to getting back as circumstances afford, but happy to dial in today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all that you do. You do a marvelous job. You truly do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. All right, Michael, you may have covered everything for us. We really appreciate your time and your continued partnership, and look forward to hopefully we'll see you in December.
Very good. Thank you all.
And we'll give you a 9 on the room rater, Michael. Okay.
9.5.
I'll take that.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We can now adjourn until 1:30 for public hearings. Thank you.
Keep us all safe, and I'm going to sleep a little bit better tonight knowing they're doing what they're doing.
Thank you for being here. I'm Shannon Moneymaker. I am the